Hello everyone, I'm Vicki Healy with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar hosted by the Clean Energy Solutions Center. Our discussions today are going to be focused on the en.lighten initiative and the Efficient Lighting Toolkit, as well as our panelists will be providing some examples of best practices in policy development, quality control mechanisms, and environmental sustainability issues. We're really fortunate today to have a great panel representing the United Nations Environment Program presenting on this initiative. So we're looking forward to their presentations. Next slide, please. So before we begin, just one important note that I need to mention is regarding the Clean Energy Solutions Center disclaimer, which is that the Clean Energy Solutions Center does not endorse or recommend specific products or services. Information that is provided in this webinar is featured in the Solutions Center Resource Library as one of many valuable best practices resources that have been reviewed and selected by technical experts. Next slide, please. Before we begin, I'm just going to quickly go over some of the webinar features for you. We'll start with the audio features. Basically, you have two options for listening, and you can either listen through your computer or over your telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the mic and speakers function in the audio pane on the right-hand side of your screen. And by doing that, we'll eliminate the possibility of feedback and echo and any additional background noise. If you select the telephone option, you can also do so by clicking the telephone option, which is also located in a box on the right side of your computer display. And the telephone number and audio pin that you should use to dial in will be displayed there. We ask that you please mute your audio devices before the presentations begin. And if you're having any technical difficulties with the webinar, you may contact the GoToWebinars help desk, and that phone number is 888-259-3826, and they will be happy to assist you. Next slide, please. So we also welcome you to introduce yourself, and you may do so by typing into the chat pane, which is located also on the right hand of your screen. And Heather, if you're on the line, if you could demonstrate that function, that would be great, just so people can see how it works. And if you'd like to ask a question, we ask that you use the questions pane, where you may type in your question. And if you're having difficulty viewing the materials through the webinar portal, you'll find a PDF copy of this presentation at cleanenergysolutions.org/training, and you can go there and find the PDF and follow along as our speakers present. Also, I'd like to advise you that an audio recording and the presentation will be posted to the Solutions Center training page, and this will occur within the next few weeks. Next slide, please. So we have a really terrific agenda prepared for you today that is focused on the importance of efficient lighting. Catherine Conway and Gustavo Menez from the United Nations Environment Program are going to provide information on the en.lighten initiative and the Efficient Lighting Toolkit, and highlight, again, examples of best practices in policy development, quality control mechanisms, and environmental sustainability issues. Before our speakers begin their presentations, I will provide a short informative overview of the Clean Energy Solutions Center initiative. And then following the presentations, we'll have question and answer sessions, and then at the end, we'll wrap up with discussion and any closing remarks from our panelists. Next slide, please. So, okay, this slide provides a bit of background, basically in terms of how the Solutions Center came to be. The Solutions Center is an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial and is supported through a partnership with UN Energy. It was launched in April of 2011 and is primarily led by Australia, the United States, and other SIM partners. And outcomes of this unique partnership include support of developing countries through enhancement of resources on policies relating to energy access. We also have no-cost expert policy assistance that is available, and we have peer-to-peer learning and training tools such as the webinar you are attending today. Next slide, please. Okay, the Solution Center, we have 4 primary goals. We serve as a clearinghouse of clean energy policy resources. We also serve, the Solution Center also serves to share policy best practices and data and analysis tools specific to clean energy policies and programs. The Solution Center delivers dynamic services that enables expert assistance, learning, and peer-to-peer sharing of experiences. And lastly, the Center fosters dialogue on emerging policy issues and innovation occurring around the globe. So our primary audience for the Solution Center is energy policy makers and analysts from governments and technical organizations in all countries, but we also strive to engage with the private sector, NGOs, and with civil society. Next slide, please. A marquee feature of the Solution Center that I want to let all of you know about is that we provide expert policy assistance. And we call this Ask an Expert, which is really and truly a valuable service offered through the Solution Center. What we've done is we've established a broad team of over 30 experts from around the globe who are available to provide remote policy advice and analysis to all countries, and this service is available at no cost. And I'm pleased to inform you that Gustavo Menez, who is one of our panelists today, is a project manager for the en.lighten initiative, is our expert on efficient lighting policy. So we're excited to have Gustavo presenting today, as he is one of our policy experts. So if you have a need for policy assistance on efficient lighting or any other clean energy sectors, we welcome and encourage you to please use this useful service. And again, the service is provided free of charge. To request assistance, it's very simple. You may submit your request by registering through our Ask an Expert feature at cleanenergysolutions.org/expert and submit your question. And then we also invite you to spread the word about the service to those in your networks and organizations. And just to cover some of the broad sectors that our experts provide assistance on include energy access, energy efficiency, renewable energy, smart grid, microgrid, clean transportation, and regulations and utilities. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in how you can get involved, we encourage you to explore and take advantage of the Solution Center resources on our website and services including the expert policy assistance that I just mentioned. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and continue to participate in our webinars, which we provide frequently. Next slide. Okay, so we also encourage you to read and comment on blogs that we have, and they are located on our policy forum page. And on our policy forum page, you will find many interesting and informative articles discussing progress of clean energy policy development and implementation occurring around the world. So we also follow similar articles posted by our partners at the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership, Leonardo Energy, and we also provide a link over to podcasts that have been developed by Bloomberg New Energy Finance. So there's just lots of great information on that policy forum page. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to just provide brief introductions of our distinguished panelists, and I'm pleased to introduce Gustavo Menez, who is Project Manager for the en.lighten Initiative at the Division of Technology, Industry, and Economics at UNEP. And Gustavo has been responsible for the United Nations Environment Program Global Environment Facility en.lighten Initiative, a public-private partnership working in close contact with governments and private sector partners to promote the global transition to energy-efficient lighting, primarily with the phase-out of incandescent lamps by 2016. He has experience in policy-related aspects of a wide range of environmental subjects, including climate change issues, chemicals and waste management, and governance. Previously, Gustavo was the climate change focal point for UNEP in Europe, in Geneva, located in Geneva, and worked at the UN Institute for Training and Research, also known as UNITAR. And next slide, please. Then we're also joined by Conway, who is the Program Officer in the Division of Technology, Industry, and Economics of the United Nations Environment Program based in Paris. Catherine provides technical support to the UNEP GEF en.lighten Initiative and she is an expert in energy-efficient lighting technologies and energy policy. Previously, she was a professor and a consultant, and Catherine has more than 2 decades of experience in global lighting and market transformation efforts. And with that, after those nice introductions, I'd like to turn the webinar proceedings over to Gustavo, who will be our first panelist today. Gustavo, welcome.
Hello, Vicky. Thank you very much. And thanks to all for being there. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because you're following us from different parts of the world. So welcome to this presentation. And I would like to present to you the UNEP GEF en.lighten initiative, which is a unique effort at the United Nations, including private sector organizations, to promote efficient lighting globally. Next slide, please. Now, the way that we're going to do this webinar is that in the first part, I will present en.lighten in general terms and its components. And in the second part, my colleague Catherine will present one of the key deliverables of en.lighten, which is the Global Transition to Energy Efficient Lighting Toolkit, a guidance document that assists countries to undertake national or regional transitions to efficient lighting. Next, please. Now, the background of efficient lighting is clear. I mean, most of you coming from government, coming from private sector organizations, coming from consultancies and expert groups, you know that lighting is a key solution to mitigate climate change and reduce energy consumption globally. The International Energy Agency calculates that lighting accounts for close to 19% of global electricity consumption. And our calculations is that that means around 6% of GHG emissions globally. The electricity that lighting generates from use of fossil fuels leads to increased greenhouse gas emissions that accelerate climate change. Now, there is a fantastic opportunity to decrease electricity demand and therefore to have less power plants needed in order to generate the same electricity with better and more efficient lighting products. The impact that could have on countries' competitiveness by reducing the imports of energy, by releasing funds dedicated to produce electricity for other national priorities such as infrastructure, health, and education are really, really important. Now, we also find that in the current international situation, electrical supply in many countries cannot be reliably met. We see the situation in Asia, in South Asia, India. 2-3 months ago, we saw a power outage in India with approximately 300 million citizens not having access to electricity. These power outages diminish countries' productivity and wreak havoc on economies, delaying the economic development of countries. But there is a solution. We know lighting is a key priority in order to reduce this electricity consumption. There are already many examples in many economies worldwide of taking aggressive strategies forward to increase the efficiency of the lighting base. This has been achieved through many appliance efficiency programs, so there are many good lessons learned out there, and the good news is that for many countries, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Next one, please. Now, let's look at how the global map in terms of phase-out regulation for inefficient incandescent lamps looks as of today. We see marked in red the countries that have already taken or that plan to take or have announced that will plan to take regulatory transitions towards efficient lighting. Now, some of these countries have started a few years ago. Cuba started in 2005, Australia in 2007. Other countries which are marked in red have not started yet, but have announced that will start soon, like Canada, which will start in 2014. Other countries have not phased out all incandescent lamps, but only have started to phase out a part of them. For instance, Russia, which has started to phase out 100-watt incandescent lamps. But the conclusion is that we're going through a global transition, and more countries are all coinciding in this solution. let's phase out inefficient incandescent lamps as the first step in this transition. Now, that takes us to the en.lighten initiative. Why are we here? So we're exactly here to accelerate the global transition to environmentally sustainable lighting. We've seen it's happening already, but in many countries it's not taking place. We're here to provide expert support and guidance for countries to undertake their own transformation programs. And I've mentioned before that there's many practices and good examples out there on the basis of which we can make recommendations. So we're here basically to be a catalyst to accelerate this global transition. We function as a global center of excellence. We have brought up around 30 organizations, including governments, private sector bodies, including research institutions from more than 30 countries. And the idea is basically that these organizations will assist countries through provision of expertise and guidance. A new thing from en.lighten is that we're a public-private partnership, bringing together leading lighting manufacturers like Philips Lighting and Osram, as well as the National Lighting Center, and we're funded by the Global Environment Facility. Next one, please. In this slide, you will see some of the organizations that are members of our task forces. A sort of a World Commission on Lighting, which kicked off a couple of years ago, trying to analyze and provide their experience, share their tools, their knowledge on how they did undertake their transition, what best practices they could take out of it. Next one, please. And as part of this global dialogue with all these previous organizations which we've seen before, one of the recommendations in order to accelerate this transition towards energy efficient lighting was to come up with a global target. And that global target, which all our task force experts and member countries recommended, was that by 2016, all countries around the world should have phased out inefficient incandescent lamps or have strategies in place or minimum energy performance standards in place to phase out inefficient incandescent lamps within an identified time frame. Next one, please. Now, the mechanism that in the en.lighten process was suggested to assist the countries which had not yet taken action to phase up was the Global Partnership Program. And this provides us a versatile and dynamic forum whereby countries can join. This is a voluntary initiative. It's open to all developing and emerging economies, and whereby they receive technical advice and support, as well as the development of target research studies, etc., to assist them to develop what we call national or regional efficient lighting strategies that would accelerate the use of efficient lighting and phase out inefficient incandescent lamps. There are so far 46 country partners that have joined the en.lighten Global Partnership Program as of today. We expect more countries to come on board soon. And we are working with these countries in two different manners, and I will explain that in the next slide. Next slide, please. Now, you will see there the names of the countries that have joined the partnership program. On top, you see the countries which have been selected out of the 46 to develop national or regional efficient lighting strategies, starting this year, 2012, and finishing on 2013. And they are Chile, the Central American region, including 8 countries, and Uruguay for Latin America. Within Middle East and North Africa region, we have Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia. And from Asia, we have Philippines. The rest of the countries, including Bolivia, Paraguay, other countries in Africa, from the West African region, and other countries in Asia, including Indonesia, Pakistan, Thailand, and Tonga, are also participating in this framework, but they receive less intense support from en.lighten. The first set of countries, the ones developing efficient lighting strategies, receive direct support. We support them both technically through experts, but as well as receiving financial support on the development of strategies which will effectively phase out inefficient incandescent lamps by 2016 using an integrated policy approach. It is not noteworthy to consider that for the ECOWAS region, that is the West African region, we're working together with the Economic Community of West African States, as well as SEED, towards the development of a regional efficient lighting strategy for 15 country members of the ECOWAS. Next one, please. Now, I've been mentioning the integrated policy approach. What does that mean? In our discussions in the enlightenment process for the last couple of years, the regulators that were present, lighting experts, private sector members, they all came to the conclusion that the most successful approach to ensure success, a permanent, a sustainable, and a globally accepted transition towards energy efficient lighting is by developing a common strategy within a given country or perhaps within a region with a common vision in terms of what are our goals for climate change, what are our goals for energy efficiency, what do we want to save in terms of efficiency, etc. And this strategy should address 4 key components that can ensure success. Now, these 4 key components include the development of minimum energy performance standards. As you know, minimum energy performance standards are regulatory measures which specify minimum efficiency levels acceptable for products within a particular country or region, defining what products can be marketed and which ones should be eliminated. Now, that is the cornerstone of an efficient lighting strategy. As a second measure, we have supporting policies. And supporting policies can be a wide range of mechanisms that will be chosen according to the country conditions and circumstances. They can include, for instance, regulatory and control mechanisms, as well as economic and market-based instruments, incentives, voluntary participation initiatives, fiscal instruments, as well as information campaigns, public communication, awareness raising campaigns, etc. This would also include actually energy performance labels. The third component is what we call monitoring, verification, and enforcement. And this is a really key element in order to ensure the overall success of a transition strategy, because that will depend very much on a well-functioning system of compliance in order to ensure that the enforcement of the minimum energy performance standards. Unless effective and timely market surveillance systems are enforced, substandard products will continue to enter national markets in increasing numbers, therefore reducing energy and financial savings. Poor quality products are also responsible of creating a bad perception on efficient lighting products from consumers, from end users, and that can bring us at risk, that can put market transformation initiatives at risk. Therefore, MD activities are highly important. And the last component, also equally important, is the environmentally sound management of lighting products. Now, we all know that efficient lighting alternatives contain mercury, some of them, the compact fluorescent lamps, but also other toxic products. It is very important to ensure maximum allowable limits of mercury within lamps, as well as to create systems to collect and recycle used lamps. So this component is very important in order to increase public acceptance and to decrease fears on efficient lighting products. So all these 4 elements should come together into an integrated approach, much like a seamless garment, in order to ensure the success of a transition strategy. Next slide, please. Now, I will mention some of the lighting tools and resources that we have developed during the last couple of years. I mentioned before that we have a network of lighting experts from governments, from private sector, from technical institutions, which are ready to provide knowledge, know-how, and their hands-on experience on how to deliver the transformation towards an efficient lighting. we have also what we call the country lighting assessments. I will explain that to you in the next slide. The Global Efficient Lighting Center, which I will also explain, a global policy map, including the status as of today of the readiness of countries to adopt this transition to energy efficient lighting. We also have a new tool which we're just creating these days, which is called en.lighten Learning, so something similar to the Clean Energy Solutions Center that our colleagues at en.lighten have put together, which we're talking today, in order to provide remote support to countries specifically on lighting. And another tool is the Efficient Lighting Toolkit, which my colleague Catherine will introduce to you following my presentation. Next one, please. Another relevant resource for countries is the MEPS scenario modeling tool, which we have just finalized and which assists countries to calculate the energy, the financial, and the carbon-related emissions of a range of MEPs that countries could choose or could select from existing MEPs or could come up with their own values, as well as calculate the timelines of that a country transition could choose. So that would be a very practical tool in order to calculate, well, what happens if I put in place MEPs as of tomorrow? What will be the accumulated savings for my country within the next few years? And according to the type of MEPs that the country chooses, and according to the timeline that the country wants to select. We're also preparing the organization of the Global Efficient Lighting Policy Dialogue, which will take place next year, mid-2013, in order to discuss policy issues related to the emergence of LEDs. Now, you're all aware of the revolution that lighting emitting diodes is bringing in the lighting world. LEDs are enhancing efficiency and provide a number of additional savings than previous technologies did. And compounded with lighting controls, they could provide exceptional savings and help us reduce electricity related to lighting. It is very exciting to know that a country like Japan has announced that by 2020 they will leapfrog directly to only LEDs, right? So they will only be using LEDs as their only light source. And a large distributor such as IKEA has also announced that by 2016 they will only sell LEDs in their shops. So this is a major move. We see that there is a whole excitement of the transition towards LEDs. And in this conference, in this Global Efficient Lighting Policy Dialogue, we would like to discuss the implications of this transition, but also what enabling policies are out there nationally, regionally, and globally to facilitate this transition, and how could countries mobilize additional financial resources to accelerate the transition to LEDs. Next one, please. I've mentioned before the country lighting assessment. That's one of the key deliverables of en.lighten. We have developed estimates in 130 countries within the residential, the commercial and industrial, and the outdoor lighting sector of the benefits of moving from inefficient, from obsolete technologies towards their replacement, their efficient replacements. Now, the global calculations of these country lighting assessments amount to a savings of approximately 5% of global electricity consumption by moving towards energy efficient lighting across sectors. Now, that would mean around 110 billion US in reduced electricity bills and 490 million tons of CO2 savings per year, which is the equivalent of around 122 million mid-sized cars. That would imply that around 250 large coal-fired power plants would become redundant, and that $210 billion could be avoided in electricity, in energy investment. Next one, please. One key component of the support that we are providing to countries is the Global Efficient Lighting Center, which is a UNEP collaborating center based in Beijing in China that provides lighting testing, training, advice, quality control, and capacity building to countries. So it would assist countries to set up their own national or regional laboratories. It would enhance systems and procedures for quality control capabilities at the country level. And it's populated by a recognized team of lighting specialists. So we're already starting using the support of the GLC in some of our pilot countries. Next one, please. This is the example of one of the country lighting assessments I mentioned before. I mentioned that we have 130 for all countries, well, actually 2/3 of the countries of the world. You can see here how a country lighting assessment is structured. You will see on the top the financial savings annually of the transition, the payback period. Below we see the electricity savings. So for the case of Chile, we see that an overall transition to efficient lighting would save almost 5% of national annual electricity consumption. And below that, you will see the CO2 savings. So the overall transition in that country would save 1.2 million tons of annual CO2 emissions. You will also see the mercury that could be avoided into the environment by having energy efficient lighting solutions. So instead of burning coal, which would emit mercury to the environment, these energy efficient lighting solutions would save 77 kilos of mercury in Chile. Next one, please. Another key tool that we have developed is the interactive global policy map, which provides an overview of efficient lighting readiness in countries. So it looks at the 4 elements of the integrated approach, which I mentioned before, and it ranks countries according to progress. Now, this allows us to benchmark countries and to be able to see the progress as they are developing legislation and standards in order to move forward with this transition. We're updating this map every quarter. Next one, please. Another key element of our support to countries is en.lighten Learning, this online center through which we engage countries, through which we share the expertise of our lighting experts on every aspect of the integrated approach. So one session of the en.lighten Learning could deal about how to set up monitoring, verification, and enforcement systems within a country, and we would bring experts on that topic. Another one could deal with how to set up collection and recycling scheme, what are best practices, what legislation exists out there, etc. Next one, please. That's it. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, Gustavo, thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I do have a couple of questions for you right now, and I'll start with the first one, and which is, how can my country join the en.lighten initiative?
Thank you very much, Vicky. So we've mentioned that 46 countries have joined so far the en.lighten initiative, and the process to do that is by completing a form that we have that can be downloadable from our website. And in that form, we request a high-level support to join the partnership. So that would mean that either the Minister of Environment or the Minister of Energy, or the best case scenario would be both ministers together, sign for the country to join this global partnership. And there is no financial commitment, there is no mandatory requirements from en.lighten to the country that joins the global partnership program.
Great, thank you. And that form is located on the website, correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Right. You can download that from our website, which you can see in the slide that I'm showing right now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And one other question real quickly before we move on to Catherine's slide is, will phasing out incandescent lamps really make a difference to global climate change?
Thank you, Vicky. Yes, the phase out of inefficient incandescent lamps can really make a difference to global climate change. We have calculated out of our country lighting assessments that approximately half of the overall savings that can be achieved from the transition of inefficient lighting technologies to efficient lighting technologies, half of these savings are made by just phasing out inefficient incandescent lamps. So this is a huge amount of money and a huge amount of reduced CO2 emissions into the environment.
Okay, great. And actually, two more questions just came in from our audience. And let's see, the first one is, do you have any information on why Ethiopia is not in the partner country group?
Sorry, Vicky, could you please repeat your question?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Do you have any information on why Ethiopia is not in the partner country group?
Ethiopia is a partner country to the en.lighten initiative, so it must have been a mistake if we have not put it on the table. That table must be outdated, but I can tell you that Ethiopia is a partner of en.lighten.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. And then one final question, and we'll move on to Catherine, is how do you take into account the rebound defect? People are installing more lamps in people are installing more lamps, or municipalities are installing unnecessary street lights because of this low consumption?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. This is an extremely important question, and in the framework of our dialogue in the various en.lighten task forces, this was debated by lighting experts, and one of the issues that we would like to study in the coming months is exploring the possible impacts down the line of the rebound effect. We are aware that as efficient technologies get deployed, there may be an increase in the use of more points of lights, and that could have an impact in terms of electricity consumption. We have not verified specifically what the phase out of inefficient incandescent lamps would mean in this sense, but this is an area that we will be researching in the coming months.
Perfect. Okay, thank you again. And so with that, I think we'll turn the next presentation over to Catherine Conway. And Catherine, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, this is Catherine, and I want to thank our hosts and welcome to the audience listening around the world, and also thank you to my colleague Gustavo. I'll be just taking a brief tour through the Efficient Lighting Toolkit. Next slide, please. This is a publication that we have available now in PDF version in English and Spanish. It can be downloaded today at this website, but I also want to let you know that by next week we will have it available in English and Spanish in ebook editions. And shortly thereafter we'll have it in Arabic, Russian, and it should also say French. So we will have 5 UN languages, and this is a very important work that has the contributions of our private partners, of our task forces, many of our advisors, and many experts who volunteered their time to debate some of the issues and to provide what they see as the best practice for all the different angles of doing a transition to efficient lighting. Next slide, please. The toolkit is divided into 6 sections. The first section is a way for policymakers to understand the reasons that efficient lighting can really help with the objectives that they wish to achieve in their nations. So we thought it was important to lay out some of the basic arguments. First, that a rapid transition to efficient lighting by 2016 is possible if countries can develop policies that phase out inefficient lamps at the same time working with their markets to bring in high-efficiency lamps. There are other advantages in addition to reducing greenhouse gases, and some of these are especially important to the developing countries that we've been working with so far. Many have peak demand problems. If you can reduce the lighting load at the peak hours of demand, you can help to avoid power outages. Also, having extra electrical generating capacity is something that you can take advantage of by redeploying it for other uses. If you can reduce your load overall and reduce your consumption, it's possible to reduce energy imports and therefore increase economic security. And finally, if enough reductions are made in consumption so that you decrease the anticipated load in the future, you may be able to reduce the need to invest in new power plants. And this is, of course, a massive investment whenever you build a new power plant. Many countries would like to have the time to plan for renewable energy power plants, and this is a way, through efficient lighting, that we can achieve some of these additional benefits. Next slide. The scope of the toolkit is single-base omnidirectional lamps, mainly for consumer applications, some people say also residential applications, and for indoor purposes. One of the questions that came in earlier was about other types of lamps and other types of applications, but for now this toolkit is focused on the transition to efficiency that's mainly based on inefficient incandescent lamps. Next slide. The second section of the toolkit focuses on the different methods of policy making, the tools that are available to policymakers so that they can create legislation, regulatory measures that will increase conformance to energy efficiency standards. They could be economic, fiscal, or market-based, so you could use taxation or you could use financial incentives, and also you can create policies that raise awareness and help influence consumer purchasing behaviors. Next slide. So we like to think of this integrated policy approach as a puzzle. And the cornerstone, the first piece that we lay down in the puzzle, is the minimum energy performance standards. The other elements certainly support this cornerstone, but it is the major effort that most people start with. And so that comes first in the toolkit. Next slide. Going about the selection of your method for developing a policy that includes minimum energy performance standards is a big task, but we think that with the support of all the experts who have worked on this and have worked to contribute their experiences from around the world, that starting out with this minimum level of product performance and energy efficiency can lead to a sustainable lighting strategy. It's very important to work with manufacturers. They can increase the efficiency of their existing products, or they can replace less efficient products with new models. Having transparent consultations with manufacturing partners, with sales people, with stakeholders, all through the lighting supply chain is essential for adoption and the success of minimum energy performance standards. This process should include practical cost-benefit analyses. These will help ensure positive economic outcomes for all parties. And we do have some tools available for the countries that we work with. We do some Excel spreadsheets and some extensive modeling, and we can share those models, and we can modify the input to reflect what our country partners provide. So cost-benefit analysis is key to coming up with a realistic minimum energy performance standard. But once you have a standard, you have to take care to work with the market to see what is happening in the marketplace through monitoring, control, testing, and then of course enforcement of compliance. The standards are a success if they're enhanced by some kind of alignment or harmonization with one country's standards with their regional trading partners. So in some parts of the world, we're very involved with groups of countries who have chosen to work together as a region. Next slide. Along with minimum energy performance standards usually go product information labels. These need to be coordinated with the standards. There are two basic types. They're mandatory and voluntary. Many countries will start with voluntary labels and then they will phase in mandatory labels. This gives the industry an opportunity to get used to the labels, to give some feedback on whether they're realistic to work with, whether any adjustments need to be made to them. Some countries go straight to mandatory labeling. What's most important is that the information be clear, that it's credible. And the reason for having labels is so that consumers can be aware of what their choices are. They can be aware of the opportunities they have to choose a more efficient lamp, to match a lamp with the amount of money that they have available to make their purchase, and also to think longer term about what purchasing a lamp and operating it might mean for their budget. So consumers can absorb quite a bit of information. It's important to have it both in numeric form as a metric, but also most labels give you some very simple scale going from least efficient to most efficient. And here are some examples from different countries of how this is done. An energy rating label really focuses on the energy efficiency, the amount of watts that go in to operate the lamp, and the amount of light that comes out to give you lighting service. Another type of label is an endorsement label. And this doesn't give you a lot of facts and figures or any scales. It basically tells you that if you trust this brand label, for example, Energy Star or Eli or Doblau Engel, it means that that authority has reviewed the product performance and endorses the energy efficiency of the product. So these are two different approaches, and both can be used very effectively even in the same market. Next slide. There's some additional policy options. One is a technology prohibition. This is where you simply ban a certain type of product, either through import, sales, and or manufacturing. Another and very commonly used policy is to encourage cooperative procurement or bulk procurement, sometimes offering subsidies, rebates, or even giveaway programs. What this does is open up the market to experience with efficient products. It lets people talk about them, see how they work, get familiar with it, and is often done in advance of the phase-in of a mandatory standard. Another policy option is to work with taxation, either to give a discount tax or a tax incentive for energy efficient products and a disincentive or a penalty tax for inefficient products. And finally, another policy could be to adjust the electric utilities regulatory mandate so that they are encouraged to promote efficiency and they are allowed to amortize the cost, the first cost of a product over a number of payments. And this is very helpful for the consumer who does not have a lot of cash flow but is eager to save on their electricity bills over time, and they can spread the first cost over a number of bills but also get the benefit of the lower electricity rate sooner rather than later. Next slide. In Section 3, we're talking about supporting policies, primarily financing. Many governments that we work with are eager to do something to save energy immediately, to reduce their greenhouse gases. They want to do something with lighting, but they realize that any new legislation requires a responsibility on their part to take a look at how to finance it. They can't just add to the budget. They have to be able to prove that any expense will give a good return on investment. So energy efficient lamps are a relatively simple option for a rather dramatic and rapid change, and a very quick way to bring energy and emission savings online fast. Next slide. As we mentioned, financing is the supporting policy. Another type of supporting policy that we'll talk about later is communication policies. Next slide. With investment, there are several things to take a look at very closely. Of course, if you have minimum energy performance standards, you want to make sure that the marketplace is able to finance this shift from inefficient to efficient products. You need to have a very strong monitoring, verification, and enforcement because this will deliver your return on investment. Your design and implementation of supporting policies needs to be coordinated both in time and in investment terms so that it is part of the overall finance plan. And many countries also are speaking with us and very eager to establish environmental management policies. This is not just simply collecting spent lamps, but it's also looking at the entire life cycle of a lamp and what a country would like to encourage or discourage in terms of the material that's used in products and that is collected later on. There are costs to this, and so these costs need to be rolled into any financing plan and really discussed ahead of time to coordinate. And finally, each implementation level for a policy will require training and support of any officials or civil society participants, so training and support has to be built into the financing plans as well. Next slide. Probably most important in terms of financing is finding the political will and the long-term commitment to make sure that the transition isn't just started and then stopped or started and interrupted, but that it has a good smooth financing plan all through the projected period of the transition. We find that regional, international, and cross-border cooperation can help lower costs. These types of collaborations may be in terms of testing, they could be monitoring programs, they could be a consistent consumer label that would appear across the region, especially when countries are small and in geographic proximity. Products move across borders, and so having a common label may help to reduce costs. Likewise, any kind of harmonization that can be done with phase-out deadlines can help reduce costs. And certainly in terms of capacities, such as setting up testing laboratories, training personnel, setting up other resources that will be needed for the program, and also even having a common funding structure that could be replicated across countries can help to not only reduce costs but ensure the sustainability of the transition. Next slide. Section 4 of the toolkit focuses on ensuring product availability and conformance. The major concern here is that the proliferation of low-quality goods, low-quality lamps, certainly messes up or contravenes fair competition. For those manufacturers and importers and distributors who make the effort to bring in high-quality products, low-quality products in the marketplace not only cause confusion, but they can leave a bad impression amongst consumers, and that really can slow down or put up a new barrier to program success. Also, low-quality goods can threaten health and environmental objectives and really cut into the benefits and savings that were anticipated from a program. So this chapter or section is all about monitoring, verification, and enforcement activities and schemes. Next slide. I would say if minimum energy performance standards are the cornerstone, then MVE, monitoring, verification, and enforcement, is sort of a foundational part of the integrated policy approach. Next slide. So what are we talking about here? Basically, you have to lay out a rationale, what your values are, what your objectives are, and take a look at how the MVE scheme is going to support the minimum energy performance standards. There should be program entry requirements. There should be some baseline that all manufacturers, importers, distributors all comply with and they all understand. The procedures and practices for handling of noncompliance have to be clear to everybody. They should be discussed in advance. They should be very clearly aligned with standards and labeling programs, and the timing of all these needs to be coordinated. Finally, any regional collaboration should be worked out, both on the standards and on the buildup of testing capacity. So laboratories need to be part of the discussion to set up MVE programs because they'll be doing a lot of the work, and you don't want to put a burden on them before they're prepared to process the volume of requests that you will have. Next slide. With ensuring the product availability and conformance, one very important aspect of this is that MVE programs give policymakers a lot of feedback. They can assure that the programs that they put in place are working, but they can also point out areas that are weak and need to be improved. Eventually, the result of this is good consumer protection, and hopefully the confidence in the delivery of efficiency will increase amongst the society as a whole. Next slide. Section 5 is a very important section of the toolkit. It looks at safeguarding the environment and health. As I mentioned before, it looks at an entire product life cycle and the management of those products in the marketplace. A lot of the information in this chapter is based on life cycle analyses that look at carbon, materials, and water consumption footprints. We do address the issue of mercury in lamps and how mercury in lamps is a somewhat different issue from mercury emissions from fossil fuel combustion. And this chapter has many very practical suggestions on how to explain these difficult technical issues to consumers. Next slide. Next slide. Mercury is one of the elements that is essential for the manufacture and operation of fluorescent lamps. Mercury-added lamps don't release mercury into the environment unless the lamp itself is broken. So a lot of the guidelines that are offered focus on how to help consumers understand how to handle and properly install lamps to prevent any kind of breakage. But we also give guidelines for collection and recycling and different methods of doing this. We have some very interesting private sector partners and civil society partners who are suggesting methods for setting up collection and recycling systems. One of the principles is extended producer responsibility in the life cycle of the products. And how this gets worked out in each country really differs and depends on the geography of the country, the distribution methods, the level of consumer action and responsibility, and the availability of manufacturers to participate from the beginning of the planning of any kind of environmentally sound management scheme. Next slide, please. We have a number of diagrams in the toolkit that explain how materials move through all different phases of manufacturing, operation, and end of life. One of the goals is to see if in sustainability you can bring the materials right back around and back into the same industry or into a similar industry. And so there are different approaches to this. I won't go into detail here. But one of the more important things to plan in your community is how to create a sustainable funding mechanism for any system that you set up, how to get full community cooperation, how to back up the scheme with adequate legislation, and finally, if there are problems, how to have a kind of enforcement that's appropriate for the level of the level of penalty that you need to ensure cooperation with the system. Next slide. The last chapter in the toolkit is on communications and engagement. The success of any program that is going to phase out lamps really depends on advanced communication, very clear objectives in a communication campaign to raise awareness, to educate consumers, and not just consumers, but everybody in the supply chain and everybody who will be participating in any kind of collection and recycling activity and any sales in the system. The focus on the communications is really to change the end user behavior, to promote general public acceptance, and also to support the phase-in as it moves through a number of time periods and different activities during those time periods. Next slide. So communications is one of those very important supporting policies. Next slide. Each country has to take a look at the audience that will be targeted in their campaign. They have to have credible, understandable, and authoritative messages. Of course, these are very, very dependent on the culture and social attitudes. There are also a number of concerns that may arise in different local markets based on who the players are in the market and what their motivations are. So basically you have to craft messages that address all of these local needs and get the main message across. To do this, typically campaigns will break their audience into what are called market segments. So you may focus on early adopters with one set of messages. You may focus on civil society and another set of messages. And it really depends on how the society is structured, how you will develop your campaign. In each part of the campaign, it's very important to have collaboration with all partners, including manufacturers, trade associations, distributors, and retailers. And finally, the message needs to reach all socioeconomic groups, and again, there may be different emphasis on wording, different emphasis on graphics, different types of images to reach all the different groups. Next slide. So we've walked through the 6 sections of the toolkit. I hope that you will take the time to download a version in the language that's most appropriate for you. Take a look at our ebooks when we have them available. And we'd be happy to answer a few questions now, either directly about the toolkit or in general. Gustavo is still available, so both of us can answer questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Catherine, great. Thank you so much. We've had just numerous questions coming in, so I'm going to go through a few with the time remaining that we have for you and Gustavo to answer, and then any questions that we don't get to in the within the time frame of the webinar, if it's all right, I'd like to send those to you and Gustavo to answer offline, if that would be okay.
Certainly.
Okay, great. The first question coming in that for you to address the SEED initiative, which is the Super Efficient Appliance Directive, I believe. Anyway, the SEED initiative under the Clean Energy Ministerial has an activity that focuses on energy efficient street lighting. And the question is, are there any possible connections with en.lighten's effort in street lighting?
At this point, we're cooperating with SEED. It's a Super Efficient Appliance Deployment Initiative, I believe.
Deployment, okay.
And what we're doing, because our toolkit is focused on the incandescent lamp for general purposes, what we're doing is referring people to SEED for its street lighting toolkit. In the future, as Gustavo mentioned, we're going to have a global policy dialogue on lighting in mid-2013. And at that time, we'll see what our stakeholders think about moving into other areas of lighting. We don't want to duplicate efforts, but we want to build on each other's efforts.
Great, thank you. And a second question from the same attendee is, would it be effective to consider a global LED lighting award towards market transformation? And the second part to that question is, are there any other award efforts out there regarding lighting?
Well, this is where I would really turn things over to SEED. SEED is set up in a way that focuses on encouraging the market to really exceed the possibilities that it has now. And SEED has a number of awards already. I know they just awarded a television for, I think, perhaps 2 manufacturers for their very highly efficient televisions. I think that the SEED program is considering lighting, but within the en.lighten initiative, we focus more on policy, and we're really very focused on developing countries and helping those countries achieve efficiency as fast as possible. And also, as the United Nations Environment Program, we're looking for very quick reductions in greenhouse gases. So while I think award programs are very commendable, and we certainly will cooperate, at this time the en.lighten initiative is really focused on policy and not on technology specific initiatives.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question is kind of interesting. How has the cooperation been from lighting manufacturers other than Philips and Osram, and is the Institute brand agnostic?
Yes, the United Nations is agnostic. We don't promote one brand over another. We're very grateful for the support that Osram and Philips have provided. We are completely open to other manufacturers participating as long as they are behind the principles of the program and can participate actively with in-kind support. We are definitely open to other manufacturers. We're in fact looking for additional support from high efficiency producers of lighting, yes.
Great, thank you. I believe you mentioned GOGLA on your labeling slide, but a question has come in, is Lighting Africa, or GOGLA, which is the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, part of the expert panel regarding standards and trade barriers for solar products for sub-Saharan Africa and off-grid Asia?
I'm going to hand this question to Gustavo, if you could bring him in.
Yes, speaking.
Yes, hi, I can hear you. Thank you, Gustavo.
Hi. Yes. So in terms of GOGLA, we just starting a new collaboration on the field of off-grid lighting, and the goal is basically to do the same that we're doing with grid lighting, which is to promote activities, policy activities in countries, the development of policies which call for the faster deployment of efficient lighting solutions. So the same way that we're working on grid lighting, we plan to work with GOGLA on off-grid lighting issues. And obviously with the target of sub-Saharan Africa primarily, but also South Asia.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. This question is regarding a specific chapter within the toolkit. So I'll go ahead and present this question, and then let me know if it's something you can answer now or if you'd rather dig into a little bit. But Section 3, Chapter 1.4.1 fails to mention that there are 2 competing POAs in India for CFLs and 3 competing POAs for LEDs in Kenya, while in most countries there is only 1 POA per region. Since the Kyoto Protocol bodies will not comment on the quality of CDM projects, would you think that en.lighten might be a suitably neutral body to compare the effectiveness of CFL and LED products funded with CDM?
That is a very detailed question. I would appreciate it if you could send that question to us, and we will reply to the listener.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I was looking through that and I thought it might be something to dig into just a bit. So, Let's see, next question. I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. So next question, awareness and education is a must, of course, but about uncontrollable behavior. In my country, 25% of the population recycles. What is the risk for the environment if 75% are unable to recycle their mercury lamps? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get through a little bit of the wording of this.
Maybe what the question is about is, if I could just perhaps summarize it, is how to encourage greater participation and
Yes.
really more responsibility in terms of handling and disposal of lamps. Is that a good summary of the question?
Yeah, and at the end, they're saying, to be clear, is it not too risky to distribute billions of mercury lamps when this kind of situation is in place?
This is one of the questions that's raised in the workshops that we conduct in each country that is presently writing a national efficient lighting strategy. It certainly is something that the regulators are aware of, and they do need to weigh the risks and the benefits. So what I can say and say with great enthusiasm is that this is taken very seriously by governments that we're working with. And we're also very pleased to have the cooperation of a number of organizations that are set up in the public sector to support effective and more productive recycling efforts. So I can't give you details, in this quick webinar, but it is something that we go into in depth in the toolkit. And then we're going to be having a series of more detailed webinars, and I would suggest that if people could send us their emails if they're interested, we'll let them know when we're going to conduct the more in-depth webinars. And the first one actually will be on environmentally sustainable management, and we'll have a number of guest panelists for that.
Terrific. That's something really to look forward to, so thank you for that additional information. Okay, next question comes from actually Ahmed, and excuse me if I mispronounce anyone's name, Ahmed Maharma from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources in Jordan. He is asking about the financial resources assigned for financing the program initiatives, and how much UNEP, how much the UNEP shares in these resources will be. How much of the UNEP share will be in these resources?
I'm going to direct this question to Gustavo. If you could
All right, thank you very much for that question, Ahmed. So UNEP and the en.lighten initiative contribute financially to the development of the National Efficient Lighting Strategy, whereby the country identifies its objectives in terms of efficient lighting, its minimum energy performance standards, the quality control mechanism, the supporting policies, etc. All these other mechanisms that we've been going through in the description of the toolkit. Now, we assign approximately $120,000 to support countries, out of which $50,000 go directly to the country itself to set up its national committee that will develop the strategy to hire experts within the country. And then UNEP also hires international experts and specialists that will support the country in the development of the strategy during the process of 1 year. That is, in a nutshell, how the financial contribution is dedicated.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Let's see. I'm just going. There are so many questions. You're going to have a lot of questions coming your way after post-webinar. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to jump over to this question here. Basically, is rather than going to CFLs, why don't we just go directly to LEDs?
Gustavo is going to answer this question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. And this is also a question that we are hearing a lot in the national and regional workshops that we are attending to. I mentioned before the example of Japan with the target of only using LEDs by 2020. Major distributors like IKEA, more aggressive target, only LED in their shops by 2016. Now we see that LEDs are dropping their price dramatically every year, approximately 20%. However, immediately leapfrogging to LED may not be wise given the price issue. Maybe it's wiser to wait a few years more until the price has dropped a bit more, and also until we are very clear concerning the quality of LED products that we can find in the market. We made reference before to the importance of monitoring, verification, and enforcement systems. 10, 15 years ago, when CFLs started being deployed in markets, we faced a lot of consumer opposition to this technology because the proper systems, the proper quality control mechanisms were not put in place. We would not like that with the LED transition happen the same. So I think it is wise to work, it is wise for countries to prepare their policies, their mechanisms for this transition, but maybe to hold a bit of time, maybe 3, 4, 5 years until this transition is complete.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gustavo. And just to follow up on the LED theme, this question comes in asking, do you know of plans to promote the general advantages of energy efficient lighting, including LED lights and solar lamps, to the broad public in sub-Saharan Africa?
I am not aware of overall programs for the whole of the sub-Saharan region. I know that there are a number of countries which are quite actively engaged in the deployment of CFLs, market transformation activities. I am aware that there are 3 countries which have phased out using regulatory tools, so MEPs, inefficient incandescent lamps, and those are Ghana, Senegal, and I think what Ethiopia has done is a technology prohibition of inefficient incandescent lamps. Then other countries are doing the deployment of CFLs thanks to the support of international donors. But again, for us, this is not a sustainable solution unless there are minimum energy performance standards that set a barrier, that set a baseline whereby inefficient products will not be allowed down the line in the future. We will see this return effect. There's a high chance that people, after these large deployment programs, will come back to use inefficient incandescent lamps simply because they are cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. By the way, I just want to let our panelists know that we're getting a lot of interest through the questions pane regarding your next webinar on environmental management. So I think we already have a good attendee list going for that upcoming webinar. Let's see, next question.
If I may respond to all these public requests, the webinar on environmentally sound management will be hosted on the 12th of December.
The 12th of December, great.
It will actually be 2 days, 12th and 13th. To cover we'll divide the world in 2, and one day will be for the 12th, and the other webinar will be on the 13th.
Terrific.
We will have this information updated in our site soon.
Okay, great. And I'll be sure to send out the information to all of the attendees today in their interest. So that they can find the information easily and sign up for the webinar. And let's just take a couple of more questions. This one is, how can I find out more about regulations for countries that have phased out incandescent lamps?
this question is going to be answered by my colleague, Catherine.
Oh, okay, thank you.
If you're interested in learning country by country what the regulations are, we have a global policy map on our website. You can click on each country, and the regulations are divided into the 4 areas that we showed you in our integrated policy approach. So for those countries that have minimum energy performance standards, where we were able to find those standards posted online, we actually have a link to them. So this is a unique resource. You do need to click around through it to find what's available. And I just want to say that for now, we're only looking at the inefficient incandescent lamp phase-out programs, but we also do have some very interesting information that we discovered on environmentally sound management and some of the supporting policies and communication programs in many countries. So this will be updated once a year. The website presently reflects the situation about 6 months ago when we completed our first round of research on this.
Great, thank you, Catherine. And I think we have time for just one more question, and then we'll wrap up the webinar. And the question is, the toolkit looks like it has a lot of good information, but how would my country know where to begin?
Well, that's a great question. We can provide remote support to countries that want to contact us directly. If a country wants very intensive support, we encourage them to join our Global Partnership Program. We are actively seeking support from donors, from bilateral donors, from foundations, from manufacturers, so that we can reach out to more countries. So I would encourage you, if you are seeking support for answers to questions and how to get started, to get in touch with us. And also, if you're listening in as a potential donor or supporter of the program, if you have particular countries that you're working with and would like to support them and work with our program, we also encourage you to get in touch.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Gustavo. So with that, I will be sending you the remaining questions from our audience regarding the webinar and additional information that they'd like to know about. And so at this point, I'd just like to offer both of you, not only I want to state a hearty thank you to both of you, but if you have any closing remarks or additional comments you'd like to make, feel free to make those at this time.
Thank you. I think Gustavo may want to say goodbye.
Okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vicki, and it is a pleasure to be working with the Clean Energy Solutions Center and with NREL. I think this is a fantastic initiative, and we look forward to more webinars.
We do as well. Thank you so much. And with that, I just want to make a couple of closing remarks on behalf of the Clean Energy Solutions Center. And first of all, again, I extend a hearty thank you to both you, Gustavo and Catherine, for presenting this fantastic information today. And also thanks to our attendees for participating in today's webinar. You've been a great audience, lots of terrific questions, and we very much appreciate your time and your interest. And several of you have asked about receiving a copy of these slides, and we have made them available to you on the Clean Energy Solutions Center website. So if you note the link that is provided on this particular slide, if you go to that link, you will find PDF copies of the presentations from today's webinar at that location. And we also invite you to visit back in the near future. In the next few weeks, we'll be adding an audio recording of today's webinar. And you'll also find information not only on today's presentations, but previously held webinars, as well as information on upcoming webinars and other training events. And again, one last thought, we invite you to inform your colleagues and those in your networks about the Solutions Center and resources and services, including the no-cost policy support. And of course, please inform your colleagues about the en.lighten initiative and this fabulous toolkit that they've put together. So with that, I just wish you all a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at future Clean Energy Solutions Center events. And this concludes our webinar.